In this episode, we are going to spend time with a topic that sounds a little formal at first, but becomes very practical once you see it in everyday work. And that is the idea of checking whether information technology, IT, resources, and project management are actually moving in the same direction. New learners sometimes hear a title like this and imagine a pile of schedules, budgets, and meeting notes. But the real issue is much simpler. Organizations invest money, people, tools, and time into IT projects because they expect those efforts to support real business needs. When that support is weak or confused, even a project that looks busy can still fail in a meaningful way, and that is why an auditor needs to understand alignment rather than just activity. The purpose is not to criticize teams for working hard. The purpose is to determine whether the right resources are assigned to the right priorities, whether projects are governed in a sensible way, and whether the organization is receiving value from the effort it funds. Once you see the topic through that lens, it becomes less about paperwork and more about whether people are using limited resources wisely. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to define the two halves of the title in plain language. IT resource management is about how an organization plans, assigns, tracks, and uses its technology-related assets, including staff, contractors, budgets, infrastructure, applications, time, and specialized knowledge. Project management is about how a temporary effort is organized so a specific change or result can be delivered, such as a system rollout, a migration, a security improvement, or a reporting upgrade. Alignment exists when those project efforts are supported by the right resources, and when those resources are being used in ways that match business priorities, risk tolerance, deadlines, and expected outcomes. Misalignment happens when a project is approved without enough skilled people, when budgets are committed without clear priorities, when teams are pulled in too many directions, or when important projects compete for the same limited talent. From an audit viewpoint, this is not only an efficiency question. It is also a governance and risk question, because poor alignment can create delays, wasted spending, control gaps, quality problems, and frustration for the people, depending on the final result. It also helps to understand why organizations care so much about alignment in the first place. A company might have several good ideas at the same time, but it will almost never have unlimited money, unlimited expertise, or unlimited calendar space to do all of them well. That means leaders must make choices, and those choices should reflect what matters most to the business. If an organization says security improvement is a priority but assigns its strongest people somewhere else, that mismatch tells an auditor something important. If management approves a large modernization effort but leaves the team dependent on outdated tools and part-time staff, that project may be set up to struggle from the beginning. Good alignment creates a chain of logic between business goals, project selection, resource commitment, and expected benefits. Poor alignment breaks that chain, so the organization starts spending effort without a clear connection to value. For a beginner, that is one of the simplest ways to think about the topic. Alignment means the project portfolio, the people, and the money all support the same intended direction instead of pulling against one another. When auditors evaluate this area, they are not simply asking whether projects exist or whether budgets were approved. They want to know whether management has a repeatable way to decide what gets attention and what does not. Strong organizations usually have some visible process for prioritizing projects based on strategy, business need, compliance requirements, operational urgency, expected return, and risk. Weak organizations often operate through urgency, politics, or habit, where the loudest request wins resources even if it does not serve the bigger mission. That creates a dangerous pattern because short-term noise starts replacing structured decision-making. An audit review would look for evidence that projects were selected through governance rather than impulse, and that staffing and budget decisions reflect those choices. The goal is not perfection, because priorities can legitimately change. The goal is reasoned alignment, where changes are understood, approved, and communicated rather than happening in a confusing way that leaves teams guessing why one project suddenly has everything while another critical effort is left underfunded and unfinished. One major part of evaluation involves understanding the resources themselves, because beginners sometimes think only of money. Budget matters, but it is only one category. Human skills are often even more important, because the right number of people does not help much if they do not have the knowledge the project requires. Time is also a resource, and it is one that organizations often underestimate, especially when the same employees are expected to support daily operations while also delivering major project work. Infrastructure, software tools, vendor support, data availability, and access to decision-makers all count as resources too. A project can look fully funded on paper and still be resource poor if critical approvals arrive late or if technical environments are unavailable when needed. Auditors therefore need to think beyond line items in a budget file. They ask whether the organization identified what the project would truly require, whether those needs were realistic, and whether management recognized resource limits early enough to adjust the scope, schedule, or expectations before the project drifted into trouble. Another teaching point for beginners is that project management alignment is not just about the beginning of a project. It has to continue through planning, execution, monitoring, and closing. A project may start with clear support and still become misaligned later if new work is added without new resources, or if key people leave and are not replaced, or if leaders shift priorities without updating timelines. That is why auditors care about ongoing oversight. They look for evidence that management tracks progress, compares actual use of resources against the original plan, and makes timely decisions when conditions change. A healthy environment does not assume the initial plan will remain perfect. Instead, it checks whether the project is still feasible and still connected to the intended business outcome. That ongoing check is important because project problems rarely appear all at once. They usually grow slowly through missed dependencies, unclear ownership, stretched staffing, and silent assumptions. By the time a formal deadline is missed, the misalignment has often existed for months, which is exactly why structured monitoring matters so much. Roles and responsibilities are another core part of the evaluation, because alignment becomes difficult when nobody clearly owns the decisions. Management needs to know who sponsors the project, who approves funding, who assigns staff, who manages scope, who accepts risk, and who is accountable for results. When those lines are blurry, conflicts often follow. A project manager may be told to deliver something without having authority over the needed people. A department leader may keep staff focused on routine work even though those same employees were committed to a project plan. Senior leaders may assume someone else is resolving conflicts between projects when no one is actually doing it. An auditor would see those problems not as personality issues, but as control weaknesses. Clear ownership allows an organization to make trade-offs openly and document why they were made. Without that clarity, project alignment becomes dependent on informal relationships, and informal arrangements often fail under pressure. For beginners, that is a useful lesson across many audit topics. Undefined responsibility almost always creates risk, even when everyone involved is talented and well-intentioned. You can also think about alignment through the lens of capacity, which means how much work the organization can truly absorb at one time. Many organizations plan projects based on ambition rather than actual capacity, and that is where trouble begins. A department may approve 5 major initiatives because each one seems worthwhile on its own, but the same small group of database specialists, security analysts, or system administrators may be required across all 5. On paper, every project looks reasonable. In reality, the same individuals are now the bottleneck, and deadlines start slipping because the organization promised more than it could support. Evaluating alignment means comparing project demand with available capacity in a realistic way. Auditors are interested in whether management understands those constraints before launching projects, not only after delays occur. Evidence of good alignment would include resource planning, skills assessments, workload reviews, and documented prioritization. Evidence of weak alignment would include chronic overtime, repeated schedule changes, constant escalation, or a pattern where critical staff are spread thin across too many priorities at the same time. Risk management also connects directly to this subject, because resource and project decisions always involve risk even when they are presented as simple planning issues. If a critical system upgrade is staffed with inexperienced personnel to save money, the organization may be accepting delivery risk, quality risk, and control risk without saying so clearly. If an aggressive deadline is maintained despite obvious shortages, management may be tolerating operational risk in order to satisfy a public commitment or internal pressure. The auditor's role is not to forbid those choices automatically. The role is to determine whether the risks were recognized, evaluated, approved by the right people, and monitored responsibly. Alignment is stronger when the organization understands the risk created by its resource decisions and adjusts accordingly. Alignment is weaker when leadership pretends a constraint does not exist and simply hopes effort will compensate for it. For beginners, that idea is important because auditing often involves seeing hidden consequences behind ordinary management choices. A resource gap is rarely just a staffing issue. It can also be a control issue, a delivery issue, and a business continuity issue. Communication is another area where alignment succeeds or fails in very visible ways. Projects often involve multiple groups with different priorities, such as business units, developers, infrastructure teams, security personnel, finance staff, and external vendors. Each group may assume someone else understands the resource limitations, the dependencies, or the reason why one project is being prioritized over another. When communication is weak, those assumptions collide. Teams may not know who has final authority, users may not understand why dates changed, and leadership may receive overly positive status reports that hide real strain. An evaluator would want to know whether project reporting is timely, accurate, and useful for decision-making. That does not mean producing more documents for the sake of appearance. It means ensuring that the right people hear the truth early enough to act on it. Good communication supports alignment because it connects expectations to reality. Poor communication destroys alignment because plans continue to look healthy long after the supporting resources have become inadequate, unavailable, or redirected somewhere else without a full understanding of the impact. A simple example can make all of this feel more concrete. Imagine a hospital wants to implement a new patient scheduling platform to improve service and reduce manual work. Leadership approves the project because it sounds valuable, but the organization assigns only one experienced technical employee, expects department managers to help part-time, and does not reduce any of their existing responsibilities. At the same time, the same employee is supporting a cybersecurity initiative and a reporting upgrade. Very quickly, meetings are missed, testing is delayed, users receive incomplete training, and management becomes frustrated because the project appears to be drifting. The problem may be described as poor execution, but the deeper issue is poor alignment between project ambition and available resources. An auditor reviewing that case would ask whether the project was realistically scoped, whether staffing decisions reflected the true workload, whether conflicts between projects were identified, and whether leadership received accurate information soon enough to make corrective decisions. That example shows why evaluation is less about blame and more about whether the organization designed a workable path from goal to delivery. Another important concept is that alignment should exist not only at the project level, but also across the broader project portfolio. A portfolio is the collection of projects an organization is trying to manage at the same time. Even if one project seems well planned by itself, it may still be misaligned when viewed beside everything else. Maybe a lower value initiative has secured scarce specialists while a more important regulatory project is delayed. Maybe several projects depend on the same vendor during the same month, creating a hidden concentration risk. Maybe leadership keeps adding strategic work but never retires old commitments, so the portfolio grows without any real increase in capacity. An auditor evaluating alignment will often step back and ask whether the overall mix of projects makes sense for the organization's goals and limits. This broader view matters because local efficiency can hide enterprise-level inefficiency. A single team may be performing well, yet the organization as a whole may still be using resources poorly if project choices are not coordinated, prioritized, and monitored at a level that reflects the full set of competing demands. Evidence is a final area beginners should understand well, because audit conclusions need support. When evaluating alignment, An auditor does not rely only on what managers say in interviews. Useful evidence can include project charters, budgets, staffing plans, portfolio reports, meeting records, status updates, risk logs, issue trackers, change approvals, and post-project reviews. The auditor compares these sources to see whether the organization's story is consistent. If leadership says a project was a top priority, the evidence should show timely funding, appropriate staffing, regular oversight, and prompt issue escalation. If a project repeatedly missed milestones, the records should help explain whether the cause was poor estimation, shifting scope, missing skills, or resource conflicts. Evidence helps separate isolated bad luck from a recurring control weakness. It also helps the auditor make a fair judgment, because sometimes project challenges occur despite reasonable alignment, while in other cases the documents reveal that the project was unrealistic from the start. A strong evaluator looks for patterns, not just isolated symptoms. As we close, the big idea to carry forward is that evaluating IT resource and project management alignment is really about asking whether an organization's commitments match its capabilities and priorities in a disciplined way. Projects do not succeed because people hope hard enough or because plans look polished in a presentation. They succeed more reliably when governance decisions, resource assignments, oversight practices, and business objectives reinforce one another instead of competing. For an auditor, this means examining more than project deadlines or budget totals. It means understanding how choices are made, how conflicts are resolved, how risks are recognized, and whether the organization has created conditions that make responsible delivery possible. When alignment is strong, projects are more likely to produce value, control, and trust. When alignment is weak, delays and overruns are only the visible part of the problem, because underneath them usually sits a deeper failure to connect strategy, resources, and execution in a coherent way.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.